I showed him a picture of when I interviewed Jerry Lewis.
Okay.
But I was showing him on my phone.
Yep.
And I said, who's this guy? And he goes, I don't know. Did he do the telethon? And I'm like, great.
There you go.
Then I moved over to Wolfman Jack, and he goes, I've never seen that guy before. And I'm like, I'm now the old guy.
Exactly. Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, it's, you turn your back 1 minute, you turn around again, and suddenly everybody's, they say be good to your elders. It's easy for me. I can't find any. I remember once back in about 1970 or 71, maybe a little later than that, I'm not sure, but The Sting had come out with Redford and Newman. And the music track was all classic ragtime stuff.
It's fantastic.
Eubie Blake, the brilliant ragtime pianist, was then like 97 years old, and they had him on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He made a wonderful appearance on that show. I treasure it to this day in my memory. He was so good. And I remember looking at his hands. His fingers were like 9 inches long from playing this ragtime piano for 80-something years. And Carson said, Eubie, we all know the disadvantages of getting older. Is there a plus side to being 97? And he thought for a minute, and he put one of those fingers up next to his face, and he was thinking and scratching his temple, and he said, well, there's not much peer pressure. just killed me.
Some people have incredible
just
wit.
Laid me straight out. And Carson's, of course, in the 70s, you'd sit around on a talk show like that, and everybody would be smoking, and Eubie's lighting up cigarette after cigarette.
And that's when it was funny.
Of course. And Carson says to him, doesn't anybody tell you how dangerous it is for you to be smoking? And he said, doctors have told me that for years. I said, well, you're still smoking. And he said, well, they're all dead.
Yeah. George Burns had some great interviews around that. He says,
the cigars he smoked.
I get up in the morning, and he goes, George, when do you know it's really going to be a good day? And he goes, well, every day it's the same routine. He goes, I sit down with the morning newspaper, I go to the obituaries, I don't see my name, it's awesome, and I close the newspaper.
He said, the reason I look at the newspaper is I find out if I've still got a bridge game that afternoon.
Yeah, yeah. Now, do you remember when you got your gig at WTTT?
Sure.
And what was the catalyst for starting that?
Well, back in 1967, when I was but a sprite, I had gone to summer camp at Camp Anderson for 2 weeks. Much against my will. I didn't want to go. I think my parents wanted a break or had a vacation or something in mind, and I got shuffled off to Camp Anderson. It was a 2-week affair, and the parents came to visit everybody the first weekend after we had a week of it, and we were going to have a second week. And I remember I spent that whole visiting time at 11, or I think I was like 11 years old that summer. I spent that whole visitation time in the middle weekend crying and asking them to take me home. I didn't want to be there anymore. I was Alan Sherman, I hate Granada. Don't leave me, mudda fada. Take me home. But they didn't. They left me there for the second week. In any event, when that was all over at the beginning of the school year, Camp Anderson always did like a fundraising thing, and they wanted to keep the camp going, and they wanted people to sign their kids up for this 2-week torture session for the following year. I got chosen to be one of the kids, to be in one of their ads. So I got trucked down to WTTT and into the production studio to record a little bit about, I'm Brian McCullough, and I went to summer camp at Camp Anderson, and sign your kids up because it's so wonderful. We all made ashtrays and lanyards, It was complete horseshit. I didn't want to be there, and I'm telling everybody how I was the original radio sellout. I would have told them anything, just in order to get this experience over with it. I don't know how long they ran that 30-second spot on WTTT. Somewhere along the way, I think I met someone who was an ancient reptile of WTTT several years later who remembered having recorded those series of ads. I don't know whether they remembered me specifically or not. Probably not. There was nothing memorable about me in 1967. But they said, oh, sure, well, you've been here before. Well, why don't you just fill out an application, and if we have something come open, we'll let you know. And so The then news director, an absolute saint of a man, a gift from God to the Pioneer Valley, was Bob Paquette. He was the news director then at WTTT, and he called and he said, we have a weekend opening for somebody to come in and just, watch the wire, watch the teletype, and if there's any stories that need to be done locally, just, rip and read and what they've got. And we just need somebody to come in on weekend mornings and do that. And I said, I'm your guy, I'm ready. So I was suddenly in radio, and I was in my 20s then, or even later.
Mm-hmm.
But I took that on in addition to whatever I had going on in my life at that point, which wasn't much. I think I was driving the senior citizen van in Amherst for a regular job during the week. And on the weekends, I was in radio, man. It didn't matter if it was a 5K daytimer. I was on the radio.
Yeah. It was big back then.
Very big deal. I also recorded the weather phone.
Wow. You did make it to the big time.
I'm telling you, when people called up that weather phone number at WTTT, I told them what to expect for the next few days of weather. And I said they counted on me, man. I was a vital part of the valley's comings and goings. Well, they had an opening come up for, I don't know, late morning or something. The owner, Ted, the late, great Mr. Ted Peen, had the morning shift from 6 to 10, and then I would come in from like 10 to 2 and just read local ads and play the music. They had me doing everything, and it was a music of your life sort of format. We played a lot of Tony Bennett and Barbra Streisand things, and that was all fine. I understood my job and I played the music. Well, I started slipping in a few little jazz cuts that I liked of my own, and people would call the station. I remember my very, very first day on the air, and I'm playing their regular playlist. And there was a song Tony Bennett had a hit with called Who's Gonna Be Around to Pick Up the Pieces After He Breaks Your Heart, right? I Want to Be Around, it was the song, or I believe that's it. But the song was all about, you broke up with me for this guy, and I want to be around to see you when you get dumped on, was basically the theme of the song. Well, this woman called immediately after I played that song and ripped me up one side and down the other. I think she had had Jack Daniels on her cereal that morning, and apparently she had a history with the station of calling in rather inebriated with an opinion about everything. Well, she called that day right after I had played my first song, Tony Bennett, and read me the riot act about it was a song about revenge, and you're terrible, and you're going to hell, and this is not God's way, and you need to be inspiring. We've got 20,000 students in this town, and you're playing a song about revenge. And I said, ma'am, I can assure you that none of those 20,000 students are listening to this radio station this morning. Absolutely none are going to be tuned in to get the latest prices on pigs and sows that we had to read every morning from the stock report. We had the stock market report and we had the stock report. We knew the prices of the goats and the shoats and the calves and the cows down pat. I said, honestly, ma'am, they're not listening. Well, perhaps they would be if you played something more uplifting. Well, you're right. We'll take that into consideration. Thank you for your thoughts. I told the manager about it because I was so upset. I don't know what I've done. This was on the playlist. This was the song I was supposed to play, but this woman is very upset. And he just laughed out loud and said, welcome to radio. You're not going to make everybody happy, and just the timing of the gods worked out that you got Agnes that calls in twice a week to tell us how evil we are. She's all yours now, Any call that comes in next week, we'll just blame on the new kid. And she'll know we're talking about you.
I haven't heard Ted Peen's name forever. Now, I remember when he did Swaps.
I took over Swaps. When I took over Ted's morning shift, Ted was retiring, pulling away from TTT and putting all of his energies into Checkers, his restaurant. And that was really the beginning of the end. Ted started cross-billing. He was giving people radio ad time in exchange for giving him some meat for the restaurant or whatever. So things got very conflated, and so his books were a mess, his money was a mess, and everything was going out the window. And because I happened to be in the building that day doing my 10 to 2 shift, was offered the morning shift. You want to come in and open this place up at 6 in the morning. You know how to do it. You know what button to push to get us on the air, because we were dark overnight.
You were just a daytimer.
Right. At 4 or 5 in the afternoon, depending on the time of year, we'd have to power down so that, only people who happened to be smooching in their car out in the parking lot of the medical center could hear us on their car radio. That's as far as our signal got after we powered down in the afternoon. But I suddenly became the 6 to 10 guy. I was the morning shift. So I read the Pioneer Valley Calendar presents da-da-da-da, and the First Congregational Church is going to be selling kumquats for their missionary students to go to Ghana or whatever. And all of those things. Local interviews, local sports, I got all of that stuff together. I had to read the school closures list, which used to drive me out of my mind. People would tune into WTTT to hear whether there was going to be school today, okay? It's not like now, when you've got a local station that runs all the school closings across the bottom of the screen. You had WTTT to tell you whether there was going to be school in Greenfield or Chicopee or Agawam or wherever. And the schools are calling in on one phone line to tell us, no, we're not closed. Yes, we're open. Yes, we're closed. Whatever it was going to be. So you're trying to maintain that list. And at the same time, you got every parent in the valley calling up on the phone. Hey, is there school in Amherst? Are you listening to the radio? Because that's where we put out that information. We can't sit here and answer the phone line for the whole morning for every parent to call the station and ask if their specific school is open or not. That's why we read it on the air. Turn on the radio to, AM 1430. Remember that? That's what you tune into, and I'll read the list in about 5 minutes. But right now I got 3 phone lines ringing from East Bafukistan that wants to tell me whether or not their class is going to happen tonight, and I've got to get that information so I can then turn around and read it on the radio. I can't answer your questions. No, I can't tell you whether there's school in Amherst today. What do you mean? You surely know. Yes, I surely know, and I'm not going to tell you. Listen to the radio. That's why we exist. So, yeah, I had kind of an attitude, and I think it was not unreasonable to have an attitude. I still believe that today. I'll defend that to this day. It was perfectly okay to have an attitude. We were doing a public service, putting it out on the radio. We weren't your personal phone line to whether or not there's school. Put the kid out on the curb. If the bus doesn't come, bring him in an hour. You'll have your answer.